Hey everybody, welcome back to Patriot to the Core podcast. I am Thad Forrester, and I'm throwing in this little bonus episode. It's actually a replay from episode number 8 with Bart Decker. I'm doing it because of the release of the movie 12 Strong that's coming out tomorrow on the 18th or 19th, whatever the date is. But a friend of mine said, man, you should go back and promote that interview you did with Bart Decker, the horse soldier, for this movie coming up, because the movie looked great. And I said, man, that's a good idea. So thank you, Jay, for the suggestion. I don't know how the movie will be, but it definitely is something I would be interested in. I don't know if I know Bart is not exactly depicted in the movie, and I'm not even sure if any Air Force guys will be. They seem to kind of be left out sometimes, but I don't know of any of them that are complaining about that. But anyway, with the release of that movie, wanted you to hear about from Bart. I have gone back and kind of edited that original version because I heard my intro before, and I sounded like I was like half dead or something. So I hope this is a little better. The intro anyway. I can't go back and fix the actual interview, but if this is hopefully a little bit better without sounding fake or something, I wanted to have a little bit more energy. It's a very interesting story though, how they inserted into Afghanistan shortly after 9/11. And they had to ride horses, many of them, because of the terrain and the width of the paths. And they slept in ditches and in caves, and it was just crazy. The target was Mazar-i-Sharif, and Teddy talks about John Walker Lindh, the capture of him, and then about Mike Spann, who was a CIA agent, I guess, who was from Alabama, and he was killed the first death in Afghanistan. So Bart was there for all that. So enjoy.
Bart Decker, it's great to have you with me. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I have wanted to speak with you for quite a while now, so thanks for responding to my message to you.
No, that's not a problem.
I told the audience that you were one of the horse soldiers, and do you mind just explaining what that was and how you got pulled into that role and maybe what it consisted of? You can go as deep as you want.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the best way to do is go about it is go in chronological order. And so when, obviously, after 9/11, we all kind of knew what was going to happen from a military perspective. So I think immediately we began mobilizing. I mean, in our job and as a combat controller, I mean our gear, our kit is always packed. Usually, each member usually has a cage at their unit, and that's where all their gear is kept, and it's usually always ready to go. So on the personal side, that's never an issue. But then all the other equipment that needs to be mobilized, to support a unit, definitely needs to be packed up. So that was done, obviously, in the following weeks after 9/11, and sometimes the dates elude me, but we were definitely we deployed to Karshi-Khanabad, what's known as K2, in Uzbekistan in early October. And our primary mission, once we got into there, was to equip the airfield with a what was called a MMLS, a mobile microwave landing system, and that was relatively new to our unit at that time. But we had quite a few guys trained on it, and what that did was, in IFR condition, which is below visual flight rules, when the weather gets really bad, it allows airplanes to come on in and land. It's, like I said, mobile system, because at K2 it was old Soviet era. It was a old Soviet airfield, and the air traffic control tower, you could tell was, you couldn't tell when we were up there, it was old Soviet era radios from probably the 60s, the early 70s, and the airfield had lighting, but that was really about it. We used our MMLS for precision approaches when the weather got below minimums. And we just kept working C-17 after C-17 in there and built that place up pretty quick. And about the middle of October is when we started, all the soft units started inserting into Afghanistan. And so the ODAs were going in, Operational Detachment, Alpha is how Special Forces are described. And we were attaching our guys with those units as they went in. And so the first unit went in the middle of October. Then a couple other units would go in shortly after that. Myself personally and another controller went in with a team on 2 November. And it just so happened, like the units that went in before us, they were not on horseback, but the guys that went in were going into the northern area. Our objective was Mazar-i-Sharif in Afghanistan, while other guys were working the Kabul area, other guys were working the Bagram area. And it just so happened the guys going to the Mazar-i-Sharif area joined up with the Northern Alliance, and that happened to entail riding horseback. So it was just kind of luck of the draw, if you will. And our DO, our Director of Operations for our unit, the 23rd Special Tactics Squadron, was the one who was appointing which guys would go with what team. And he was kind of the orchestrator of it all, the mastermind of it all. So I just I drew that slot with with the horseback mission.
How big was your team?
Yeah, so when we went in, our team was our team was kind of made up of it wasn't a direct ODA. The team that I was on, they called it an ODC, Operational Detachment Control, and they had that configuration back in Vietnam, and it hadn't been used since then. So my team comprised of a lieutenant colonel, a major, a sergeant major, two E7s and an E6, and then myself and another controller. So there was 8 of us on that team when we went in.
Okay, I didn't realize there was another controller there with you on that team.
Yeah, that's correct. And then also in that same area of operation, there were 2 other ODAs that were really on our flanks, and they each had controllers on those teams as well. And like I said, and we would meet every now and then, every couple of days, as we moved north to our objective, Mazar-i-Sharif, and we inserted into a valley. We went in by helicopter, and then from the helicopter, we were on horseback from that point on for about 10 days. Because I think we finally got into Mazar-i-Sharif on or about November 12th, right in that time frame.
So what was the learning curve like with the horses?
Yeah, it wasn't as glamorous as it looks, I can tell you that. It was not only on horseback, but there was a lot of donkeys. So what we had was we had basically our day pack on, and then of course our weapon, ammunition, our vest with everything on it. So all that right there weighs about 60, 70 pounds. And then our big rucks we had on donkeys, which the Northern Alliance walks. So obviously we had all our ComSec and all our high value items on our person at all time. But like our clothes and some food, tents, those type of supplies were all on donkey. Because you just couldn't carry all that on horseback. That would get walked, and that would usually catch up with us later that evening or the next day, depending on how long we stayed at one site. So the learning curve was very very high, because not only were you that heavy sitting on that horse, but the horses all had wooden saddles, and they weren't very tight. So you were always sliding around, and it just wasn't very comfortable. It's not like riding in a vehicle, for sure. And we moved both day and night, depending on which day we were moving. And the reason why horseback was the ideal choice to move is because of the mountainous terrain we were moving through most of the time. and the ledges we were walking on were only probably about 2 to 3 feet wide. I mean, you couldn't ride a motorcycle or an ATV through there. It just was not permissible for a motorized vehicle. So, well, horseback was the way to go, and well, worked out, for us.
So did the people at, was it called Mazar-i-Sharif, did they know you were coming?
Oh, I think they had a pretty good idea. We were coming. Although, the Taliban held that city, until we got there. Obviously, Taliban held all of Afghanistan, ruled. Well, let me back up a little bit too. You had asked too earlier in a question about living conditions, and no, it is so remote where we were all the way up into Mazar-i-Sharif. It was just mud hut villages that you would pass by. So our first few nights, we actually lived in caves in the side of the mountain, and for the first couple nights, and we just slept in basically in ditches, and then there was a lot of old outposts from the Soviet, the fight from the Mujahideen fighting the Soviets that were still there. So the place was still heavily mined all over. So that was another reason going with the Northern Alliance was the right thing to do, because they knew the territory like the back of their hand. They knew where all the minefields were, so that kept us pretty safe in that respect as we moved forward up to Mazar-i-Sharif. And on our way, my group, we only encountered a rocket fire on the last day, actually, prior to going into Mazar-i-Sharif, and another controller from one of the other ODAs was working some fighters while that was all going on as we were coming up to this OP observation point, and then I joined him in that respect and worked some fighters as well that evening, and then the next day is. Like I said, I think it was about 10 days total on horseback. We went into Mazar-i-Sharif at that time. And as we went into Mazar-i-Sharif, the people started lining the streets because, well, let me back up. That evening, we were on top of a mountain after working a lot of fighters, and you could see all these cars leaving Mazar-i-Sharif by headlights. And what it happened to be was all the Taliban were exiting the city. So actually, Mazar-i-Sharif became liberated that day, that evening, and then the next day we went into town, and people were all lining the streets, clapping, cheering that the city was liberated at that time.
Did you have any firefights or have to drop any ordnance before you got there?
Yeah, just that day, and like I said, keep in mind there was another controller with one of the ODAs. That's mentioned in the Horse Soldier book, and he worked a lot of CAS missions, close air support missions, as we moved up. And like I said, they were on one flank, and then we had another ODA on the other flank, which I don't think that the controller with that other ODA worked any CAS as we went up to Mazar-i-Sharif. Just one of them with I think it was 595 was the ODA.
Okay.
Number.
I read an interview where you talked about the terrain, and but I mean, it sounds like y'all moved at night too. Was that a regular, or just occasionally did you move?
It was both. It was a little of both. We moved a couple nights, and then we moved by day as well. Then we would sit at an OP for. There was no set pattern. It just was all on the circumstances on whether we moved that night or day, but we did movements both.
So how did you, when your medic, is this when the medic broke his back? Was before you got there to?
Yeah, that was not true. That's a fabricated story. I think he's been admonished for that, and that definitely was not true.
Glad you cleared that up. Yeah, so what happened once you got there and the people were cheering for you and they were liberated? I mean, what did you do next?
Well, we went to The group that we were with was led by the Northern Alliance group. Was led by General Dostum. So we went to Kuala Jangi, the fort, and that might have heard of, became famous during that war of the uprising. And so we went to that fort, and we ended up staying there. And that was Dostum's old fort. And we ended up staying there for about 2 weeks. So after we were there for about 2 weeks, then we were bringing in more people, more supplies, and then while we were there, the SF team, more leadership came in from the Special Forces, and we ended up setting up a tactical operations center, and we ended up doing that at what used to be, it was an old abandoned all-girls school. So we moved from the fort to that schoolhouse, and that's where we ended up. It was a hardened building. The fort was just a big mud hut. But once we moved to the school, that was a 3-story hardened building. We ended up hiring a lot of the locals and got a lot of stuff fixed there and got it all operational again. And then at that point, we obviously transitioned over to vehicles. We had a couple vehicles brought in, brand new vehicles brought in by helicopter, and then we bought a lot of vehicles off the local economy there, the old standard Toyota Hiluxes and stuff that you see in all the pictures. So then we started, we're going to do our daily operations, which would be running the airfield, which is one of our primary missions as a controller. But after we were in that school, I can give you the rundown story here of how we got all the prisoners. So when we're at the schoolhouse, Dostum was asked to go negotiate a prisoner surrender over in another town, and so at that point we were about ready to leave, and it was myself and another group of guys, and then we obviously a lot of the people that came in downrange later after we got into Mazar-i-Sharif stayed back. As we were leaving the town, down the road comes about 400 to 500 Taliban saying they wanted to surrender. So what happened was Dostum let them through, and they took them over to the fort that we were at, those prior 2 weeks before we moved to the schoolhouse. And within that group was John Walker Lindh. So we ended up leaving, going to Kunduz, and that's when they had the prisoner uprising about 2 days later after we had left. And that's when some of the other government agency guys got killed, or one of them got killed there. And then they had the big uprising there, and we were in Kunduz. So how it all worked was the AC-130 gunships had just got into country right at that same time frame, and so the gunships were used at the fort to squelch the uprising, and also I worked the gunships at Kunduz, which facilitated another huge surrender of we had probably over 1,000 that were in Kunduz that surrendered. To tie us all together of recent events that just happened here in the U.S. Last year, one of those guys that were that 1,000 that surrendered was Mohammed Fazil, which happened to be one of the 5 high-value target Taliban that got released from Gitmo in the prisoner exchange for Bergdahl exchange last year. So, yeah, you can see how it all tied together.
Yeah. I mean, what went through your head when you found out that we released him amongst anyone, but specifically him for Bergdahl?
I don't understand. I just don't understand why that would happen. I mean, this guy was he was a high-ranking Taliban official. As a matter of fact, before, while we were there at Kunduz on the side of the hill, he came up to the hillside, sat down with Dostum and a couple other Northern Alliance generals, tried to facilitate some type of negotiation. Then he went back with his people back down into Kunduz, and the way it all worked out was, or as found out later in hindsight, was the HC-130s did not come on station that night. They were going to attack us and probably would have overrun us because we were definitely outnumbered. But it just so happened, luckily, the HC-130s were on station, and we utilized, those aircraft. And after that facilitated their surrender the next day. So it just happened to work out. But yeah, like I said, he was a very, very high-ranking official, and I just don't understand the trade, because the other four guys with him, they wouldn't have been in Gitmo if they weren't, because what happened was all those guys that surrendered ended up going to another town, and then they were all vetted and interrogated, right, by our personnel, other government agency personnel, and we took the hardened ones, the high value targets, and they ended up going to Gitmo because they had the most, they could do the most damage, right, as the leaders and of the Taliban in this case at that time, and so there was a reason why they were in Gitmo, and there was a reason why they should stay there, and like I said, very, very discouraging, and I'm sure they're back in the fight right now.
Yeah, no question about it. And you said in with that group that surrendered was Johnny Walker Lindh. When did y'all find out there was an American in that group?
Yeah, I think while we were over at Kunduz, there was a couple other government agency guys at the compound or at the Kuala Jangi at the fort interrogating the guys, and that's how they ran across him. He was in that group of that 400 to 600 guys that initially came down the road as we were leaving town, and so he ended up being kept over with us at the ops center at that school. When we returned from Kunduz, he was there already, and so he was with us for a few days, and then we put him on a 130, and he ended up obviously coming back to the States, so we got him out of there.
Well, you may not want to answer this, but I'm just curious, what are you thinking? How do you control yourself maybe, or control your rage when you see an American that's over there that's turned against us?
Yeah, I personally just stayed away from him. I let the SF team guys handle him, so I didn't really. Obviously, it curdles your blood, but I just went about my business. We had an airfield to run in other operations, so I let SF do, or I didn't let, but SF did their job and handled him. And the only time I saw him again really was when we put him on the 130, because we were working the airfield there and got him out of there.
Well, it sounds like there was large numbers surrendering very early on in the war. Is that right? And I guess really what caused them to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look back at it, it was set up, by Secretary Rumsfeld and all the commanders, and obviously I'm going to give give kudos to another book. It was called First There by Gary Sharon. He was with the CIA, and they're the ones who really set it all up at the beginning, because 9/11 happened, and then you got to react quick, right? Mm-hmm. So it was really set up brilliantly, if you think about it. I mean, we were just executioners. I mean, not executioners. We executed the plan that was set up. But the plan was brilliant that our leadership set up at that time. Yeah, I think Afghanistan was liberated like in 49 days, if I'm not mistaken. on the number. And so, yeah, you would have large droves of people surrendering or fleeing, Taliban in that short amount of time, and that's exactly what happened.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that. When there was the uprising, was that when Johnny Michael Spann was killed also?
Yeah, that's exactly correct.
Okay. He's actually from about 20 minutes from my hometown, and I think he was the first American killed. Is that right?
I do believe so. That's correct. And it's sad because I sat next to him in a van, and we were there in November, so we were there on Veterans Day, and we were already up in Mazar-i-Sharif. Dostum had us all over to a house where he was at and gave us, a veteran's, he was a Marine veteran, and, had a celebration, if you will, for us as veterans on that day. So I got to meet him for, a brief period. It was obviously a great tragic loss, just like all the lives have been since then.
Yeah, it's sad. I've seen his daughter on the news before, and she was very, very well spoken and just very well put together. I think she was in college, and she's seemed to have done well for herself. She's probably out of college now. I'm not sure, but yeah, it's terrible. What else about? I was just so interested in this whole deployment of yours. How long were you in country?
So, really, this was a great thing about being in special operations. We were only there from beginning to end on my first deployment there. I was only there for 4 months. So we ended up pretty much all the excitement that I told you was over, and we just worked the airfield there for I don't know, probably the next 2 months, because I remember I think I went home. I think we left Afghanistan around the 13th or 14th of January, and me personally, and went back to K2, and then I think me and some other guys left K2. We were just going out in 2s, 3s, 4s. We weren't leaving as a unit because we were getting backfilled too by other guys from other units. And I think I want to say we left around January 18th, 20th time frame, where I went home, and then went back on another deployment in May, from May to September, another 4-month deployment, because at that time then they started setting up rotations between the squadrons.
So had you had many deployments prior to this one in 2001?
Well, real world, you mean?
Well, I don't know. I guess you had gone all over.
Yeah, I traveled all over the place for 20 years,
Okay.
I would say the only other, real world, back in the, you might be too young to remember, but back in the 80s, we had a Sandinista-Contra war was going on down in Central America. So I deployed down there for a month to support that. Did no action or anything like that, but it was a real world deployment, if you will. And then just as my career went, I was kind of always in the wrong place at the wrong time as far as when the real world stuff came up, because I was on the Pope team for 5 years, from 84 to 89, and other than what I just told you about Central America, really nothing really was happening. So I became a combat control school instructor in 89, and about 6 months after that is when the Panama invasion happened, and the 2-1 STS at the time was the team that went, and then Desert Storm kicked off, and I was still an instructor, so I didn't go on that, which I guess I didn't miss anything really on that from what I understand. And then I went up to Alaska for 4 years, and nothing really there, just training, and then came down to Hurlburt in '96 at the 2-3 STS, and then obviously I was there through 9/11 and retired in '03. So obviously that was my biggest deployment. But we went on we did a lot of stuff throughout the years. Whether not combat engagements or anything, but obviously 9/11 was the biggest deployment of my life, and one you'll never forget. So
I'm sure. Yeah, that's what I was trying to figure out. Is I didn't realize how long you'd been in. So I didn't know you were in the 80s and part of Desert Storm. Desert Storm was really when I was a teenager, and that's when I really was paying attention a little more to what was going on, and I had tons of American pride about it with Norman Schwarzkopf, and I just
Storm and Norman.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We were just kicking butt over there, or at least I thought we were, and I thought we were unstoppable at that time.
Well, and that's when the U.S. perception of the military, as I saw it, changed to all positive. When you look back, and I came in the '80s, so I had a lot of Vietnam guys that really I learned from. And I was under. They were senior NCOs, and I was the the young guy. So they were my mentors, at that time. And and they talked, they always talked about their, you listen to their stories and hear their talk, and and then just traveling around the country back in the '80s, and how you were treated at, the military and stuff. But then after Desert Storm, I could see the perception and the feel of the U.S. really back in the military. And the perception, I think, changed at that point for the good.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've never had anybody compare them from the '80s and prior to Desert Storm, but it definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah.
One more thing I wanted to ask you about was while you were deployed there in Afghanistan, is that I think y'all had something called the Angel of Death. You want to elaborate what that is? What that was?
Yeah, if you go back when I was telling you working on some AC-130 gunships in Kunduz, I had three gunships, and one would come on station, one would leave, another one would come on station, and they would leave. And one of them that came on station had the female on the radio, and it was where we were. Up on a ridge line, it's dark and it's quiet, and so Dostum, General Dostum was standing, behind me, and he could hear her voice through the handset of the radio as I was talking to the airplane. Actually, I was talking to her, and he, I don't know, I don't think he coined it, but you know how the Taliban look down on the women, so he made it a point to put the broadcast on the radio, that a female was up in this plane, kind of dealing death on you. But I think it was our media that took that and ran as the Angel of Death.
Okay.
So that's how that all came about.
That's cool. When you deployed, y'all took a piece of the World Trade Center with you. And then I think before you left, you buried it there.
Right. Yeah, the SF team did, and and I knew one of our guys had it in his ruck and carried it through, and then in Mazar-i-Sharif, we did a little ceremony there and buried it there. So yeah, it was kind of moving, obviously.
Yeah.
Innocent people losing their lives like that.
Did your family know where you were, or did they find out much later after you got there, or what was the situation back home?
Well, I mean, they knew we were going into Afghanistan. I mean, everybody knew that, right? When we deployed,
Mm-hmm.
I probably went for I don't know, probably 2 months without talking, month and a half And then once we set up the operations center in Mazar-i-Sharif, we had really good internet connection down there. Actually, to be honest with you, we had portable satellites set up, and we were able to talk back and forth at that time. And then also we could use the phones and do a morale call every now and then. But I usually just you just have to type generically, but send emails. All's good and this and that, and just had to watch your OPSEC.
Yeah.
At that time, your operational security, and but at that time, we were communicating freely, emailing every day at that point.
Okay. Wow. I mean, 2001. I think the first time I ever used email, I know it was 1998. I guess I just didn't realize. It's kind of hard for me to believe that there was such good internet over there in late 01.
Yeah, we had some great comm guys that set up some really good stuff, and it was really good, actually.
Before we move on to maybe to the monument, is there anything else you'd like to share about your deployment, or anything, or elaborate on anything we've been talking about?
No, everybody says thank you, and I can just tell you it was there's no thanks needs to be given. I mean, it was that's what we trained for, and I was glad I was there at that time and able to go in and do what we did, and wouldn't change a thing. I'd like the way the dominoes fell, to that point, I would live it all over again the same way. So.
Did you feel that the rules of engagement, did they negatively affect you or your team at that point when you were there?
To a certain point. I probably won't get into them because probably some of the stuff's still classified. But yeah, to a certain point it did, and I wish we would have had some A-10s and AC-130s in theater a little bit earlier, but I know that the perceived threat was the reason why they weren't in earlier when we were moving. But the ROEs on using the fighters inhibited us a little bit. But like I said, I won't get in any deeper than that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting because I don't know much about it, but I have, I've felt that, or I think the rules of engagement have gotten tighter and tighter, and I think in my opinion, they've definitely hurt our guys, and I'm sure they're much tighter now than they were when you were there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Other than, our ROEs on the ground, it was pretty much the Wild Wild West, if you will. But then when the aircraft came overhead, they had their ROEs on what they could do and how they could do it, which, kind of inhibited us a little bit, like I said, it hindered a little bit. But we worked through it, and that was all good. But, yeah, the guys that are there today pretty much have their hands tied, from what I understand, what I hear, and the talk around, because, I still stay in the community a little bit, and, it's definitely not good. So, I mean, I just heard a general do a quote. And I won't do him justice because I don't remember how it goes. But we're good at short wars and we're terrible at long wars. And this is a long war, and we're sitting over there, and the ROEs get placed on you, and we're not good. The military is not a nation builder, and that's pretty much what we're over there trying to do right now. And that's just not what the military was made to do. The military is made to destroy things and win. So that's my opinion.
Good point. So when you, at some point later, there is an artist that created a monument dedicated to the horse soldiers. And first of all, there is what I call an iconic image of you. Well, several guys on your team, I guess, Bart, but I think you are kind of the focal point in the picture of you on a horse, and so there's a monument now in New York City that's dedicated to the horse soldiers, or at least a depiction to represent y'all. Do you mind telling us what that's about?
Yeah, I think It was, a matter of fact, that's funny. Ironically, I just got an email from that retired sergeant major. Now the sergeant major I was telling you that was in our team, saying that they're doing the final dedication. So they did a dedication on that. I think it was 4 years ago. I went up there, and it was on Veterans Day. They put it in a temporary location, and it was a catty corner across the street from the One World Trade Center now. Now it's going to its final place, and I don't have the exact address of it, but yeah, it was made to it was all private donors that I guess had this made, and the gentleman's name, his name eludes me now, the sculptor ended up getting it done in record time, and they had it up there for that ceremony. And we went up there, and Vice President Biden spoke at a dedication, and I guess they wanted to, it's kind of interlaced with, with the first responders out there in New York City, and it sits, overlooking the One World Trade Center. I do believe the final resting place is still going to be right in that area where it's right by there. So, it's kind of an extension of, our follow-on, I think, symbolic, if you will, our follow-on in the actions that we took after, the attack on our soil.
Mm-hmm.
So that really, sums it up, if you will.
Yeah, it's an impressive looking statue or monument, whatever you call it. It's pretty tall. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's big. Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
Well, I want to see that. So whenever I get to New York again, which my wife is dying for me to take her, that's one stop we have to make. I think that it seems like the artist, maybe he had a French name and he created it in Kentucky or something like that.
Yeah, it was in Kentucky because we went to his studio there. He did a lot of work at another place and then brought it there to the studio to finish it.
Okay. Well, did you ever look back and just think, man, that was crazy. It was crazy times, or how did I get through it, or anything like that?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. You look back and you're like, man, of all the technology, even in '01, we had a lot of technology in the soft field, and then next thing you're jumping back and. The Genghis Khan days, and you're jumping on horseback. Of course, you got a $60,000 radio on your back. That's your lifeline. Because that's what we use to, communicate with. And but yeah, it's crazy. Every time I look back on that thing, it's crazy.
Did you ever have to engage the enemy with your gun while sitting on a horse?
No, I never fired my weapon.
Okay.
I didn't fire my weapon the whole time I was there.
Okay. Well, how did you adjust to life after deployment, and then, or maybe more specifically after retirement? I'm not sure which was tougher, but.
Adjustment. I knew it was time. I put it like this. I did it more. I retired more on the family side of it. I could have probably stayed at Hurlburt a couple more years, but I was in E7, and if I was going to stay in, I definitely would have stayed in to make E9 chief, which is obviously the highest rank in the Air Force, enlisted, and but I always promised myself once my two daughters got into high school that I wouldn't move them, and they just happened to be in high school. In 2003, actually one was a sophomore, and actually one was in 8th grade. She wasn't even in high school yet. So I said, now it's probably as good as time as any. I'm at my 20-year mark. I go, I'm not going to go any higher. So I just decided to call it quits at that time after 20, and so it was actually 20 in a few months, and got out, and the adjustment wasn't difficult for me. I missed the mission. I missed the guys. I don't miss a lot of the military. I don't know, the military drill, if you will. The requirements in the military, but I definitely miss my unit. Excuse me, and the personnel and the mission. So.
Yeah, I guess it's that brotherhood that you miss.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
So if you had to, or if you could do it over again, would you?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I had a great career. Even in everybody jokes about Fayetteville, North Carolina, as Vietnam,
Yeah.
Terrible place to be stationed. I was stationed there for 8.5 years. And I had a great time. It was because of the team, the people on the team and who you were with. It was just a great time. Did 4 years up in Alaska, great time, and did my last 7.5 at Hurlburt down in Panhandle, Florida, great time. It's absolutely do it all over again, same way, no doubt about it.
Cool. What advice would you give to guys now that are considering the CCT field?
Oh, I would definitely encourage them. It's not an easy ride, and if I could, I'd quote one of my buddies, a recent retiree, Bruce Dixon. It's even after you're in, you got to prove yourself every day. I mean, there's no free ride, and once you're in, I mean, you have to stay on top of your game. I mean, that's the reason why SOF is so successful. Our SOF units are so successful is because we continually train and train and train. And when we were in Afghanistan and dropping bombs and ordnance, it was just like we were on a training mission here back in the States. It was. We were doing everything that we would do there. We were just doing it to happen to be doing it on the real battlefield, and there's no substitute for training, and that's why we were so successful. Everybody was on top of their game and stayed on top of their game, and that's what you have to do when you're in that career field.
Wow, well said. Well, I mean, in my opinion, you definitely are somebody who paved the way, and I know there's a lot of guys before you, but I think it's just what you did was obviously so critical for the war on terror, and I've just really been looking forward to talking with you and to hearing you share some about it. You seem to kind of, be kind of a private person. That's my impression of you anyway, and just a quiet professional, and so thanks for sharing a few circumstances with us today and a few feelings with us. And
that's not a problem. Yeah, I try and stay humble, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, you are. Is there anything in closing that you'd like to say?
No, I see. I guess that's why I'm a quiet. No, I'm not. Actually, if you're around me, with a few beers, I'm probably one of the loudest guys there, but not spouting off by any means. But no, I like I said, I think I've pretty much capped everything, and I enjoyed my 20 years there, and I would do it all over again. So I think that marks success when you say you would do it all over again in the same way.
Yeah.
So I guess I had a successful career.
Well, you are exactly what this podcast is about. You are a patriot to the core, and I really thank you. And I know there's a book called Horse Soldiers that documents this particular deployment. Is there any other literature out there that people could read to learn about it?
I would just say I think First There by Gary Sharon.
Okay.
Is a great book, and that's really if you want to go in chronological order, I would read if anybody's interested in reading the books, I would read that one first, and it sets up everything for what happened next. It was really the title says it all. I mean, they were in there first and got everything organized with the Northern Alliance and the other warlords, if you will, at that time, shortly after 9/11.
Great. Well, I'll put those in the show notes so people can. I'll have a link there where they can go.
Look the book up and make sure I have that correct. If you Google it, I'm pretty sure if I have one of the words wrong or something in the book, it'll come up correct.
Sure, I sure will. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate you, Bart, and I don't think we've met, but I hope we do. Maybe at a reunion or something. So.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'd love to shake your hand, and my deeper sympathies to you and your family for your loss and our loss and our community with your brother. But I want to say something. I looked. My wife read that book first, and then I downloaded it. I just see your brother with that Alabama hat on, and he something just grabbed me. I saw that picture first when my wife was reading the book, and I go, there's a stud right there, and then so that kind of made me read the book, and sure enough, your brother was, and everything that goes with it. So the picture just reveals a lot of things, and that one with his kid on and that Alabama hat on was definitely one that caught my eye and piqued my interest for sure.
Well, good. It's good to hear. That was a source of a small debate of what image to use, but no doubt that was the right one. So I'm glad to hear from somebody like you that it affected positively. I still think, and I've said this before in another interview with my publisher, that I think that cover is one reason why Costco will not put the book in their store. That's a personal opinion. They haven't said it, but I think that they think
really?
it's too strong. I'll always believe that unless they. I'll always believe it until they put the book in the store, which still working.
Yeah, I got you.
Well, thank you, sir. Yes, my brother was a stud, but you are too, and so I'm really grateful for your service and for your willingness to fight the enemy and to do so much there in the early days in the war on terror.
Well, I appreciate that, and hopefully I'll see you down in one of the reunions one day and shake your hand and talk with you.
Great. Sounds good.